On to the other markets, starting with the BRVM. The BRVM 10 index closed trading on Friday at 234 points. It was down just over 1%. And while the all-share index, the BRVM composite, lost 0.9% to close at 209 points. Total value traded on the day was 229 million CFA francs, and the currency fairly stable at 501 to the US dollar. Now, moving on to Nigeria, of course, the market has been volatile recently. We did see a moderate recovery at some point last week, but it certainly wasn't sustained. On Friday, we saw a major decline where the market was down 1.4% to close at 36,464 points for the NSE All-Share Index. Volumes traded were up 50% though, so that was a positive. We saw about 5.2 billion naira worth of deals done, and among the major losers were Shaka Cement, Unilever, and FBN Holdings. Let's now have Chukwuma to give us his thoughts. Chukwuma Anyanwu, head of research at Morgan Capital Securities, and he joins us in the studio. Chukwuma, thank you so much. You know, the market has been volatile, like I mentioned earlier, and at some point last week, I think there was a sense that we were beginning to get to a stable point, but of course on Friday we now saw the market fall almost 1.5%. So where do you see it going from here? What's your outlook for this week?
We think the bearish trend will continue for the better part of this week, and we think the bearish sentiment would override the better part of this week.
Why do you think so? Because many will suggest that some of these stocks are becoming reasonably priced, although many will still argue that some of those consumer names are pretty expensive.
Yeah, our sentiments, particularly towards the consumer goods sector, is that we've seen too much expectation to their forward earnings, and our current prices might not be justified even in the next 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So we've seen an ambitious expectation for their returns, you know, both from the safety perspective and the fact that people feel they are stable names, you know. But honestly, we think that sector is very pricey. We think it has so much weight to shed, you know, and generally we think that sentiment would affect the
I think a lot of people will link the recent fall to sentiment elsewhere. Of course, what's happening in the US and the view that we may see some monetary tightening at some point, higher interest rates in the US impacting emerging markets, and of course Nigeria has been impacted by that. So would you say this is like a wake-up call for, particularly for the consumer names? You've just spoken about the really rich valuations.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call. In addition to what you just said, I think the market, you have investors playing both the forex game and the equities game, you know. So they are trying to ensure their returns on the short term, you know, whether from the equities market or from the forex angle. So generally, I think as the year progresses, we'll see some form of stability back into the equities market, and we'll see some companies that we are currently looking at that are very undervalued, returning good towards the end of the year.
So which companies do you like right now? Which stocks are looking attractive for you?
For us, we are very upbeat on the banking sector. We think Zenith will return a very good percentage to investors as the year progresses. We also like First Bank at these prices. We think they are fundamentally okay stocks. We think the book cleansing we saw in 2010, 2011, we think they are pretty much wound down on those. You know, so we don't expect, with all the better asset quality we've seen on their loan books, we think we'll see better performance on the bottom line.
Right. Okay, let's move on to some company news. Of course, Oando reported overnight, and the market will be starting the day, you know, more or less digesting those numbers. So your thoughts about them? I noted that they are restated. They are comparing 2012 numbers with restated 2011, but be that as it may, many people say on the surface pretty solid performance with earnings per share up over 500%. Yeah. Your thoughts on the company?
It's a fantastic result from Oando. We think they've started the process of ensuring that their books are better with respect to how leveraged the company has been over some years. We think the fact that they still have to pay that much finance cost, interest obligations on their part is still very unattractive for us, and we think that it's a good performance, but we have a very neutral outlook on Oando.
Why? Because you think it's all priced in already?
It's priced in, but
or do you think, are there risks that you see
beyond that? Yeah, there are always risks, particularly with the Nigerian petroleum sector. You have the unresolved PIB issues and the food deregulation that hasn't been implemented yet. So we think there are risks in that sector. We think we are approaching that sector with some form of caution. But having said that, we are upbeat on Total. We think Total is a good pick in that sector. We think Total is a solid company. Well, even in a situation where we have the food regulation of the downstream kick in, we think Total is very well positioned, to latch in on the benefits that would accrue to them. They have widespread reach, and we think it will be a game of numbers when it comes to the food regulation kicking in. So we think Total is very well positioned.
But is that likely to happen anytime soon? I would say no. What do you say?
Oh, well, you never can tell. Anything happens in Nigeria, but the truth is we don't expect it to happen within this dispensation anyway.
And so, and if it doesn't happen, I guess the risks of investing in that sector remain.
That's why
higher oil prices,
that's why
I think, really puts a lot of pressure on those. And of course, the subsidy payments, they haven't been totally stable. So many of these companies can't count on them.
That's why you see them. That's why you see them depending a lot more on short-term financing from banks at high interest rates.
Right. But looking at the macro picture, though, is there any other risk out there that you think investors should be paying more attention to? Right now, there's a lot of more concern. I won't say a lot, but more concern around the currency. Now we're seeing the Naira trading at over 160. So your thoughts on other macro issues that may be impacting investor sentiment going forward?
We think the currency angle might have seen all the negatives around the currency sector, around the currency at this period. We think at some point as the year progresses, the currency will hold firm. So as much as we ascribe to the fact that that's a risk factor at this point, but we think it will be stable within the short possible time.
All right.